The fluorescent lights hummed above the empty corporate lobby as Darius Mitchell pushed his cleaning cart across the polished marble floor. It was nearly 11 at night, and the Hartford Financial Building had long since emptied of its daytime population. He preferred these quiet hours when the only sounds were the soft squeak of his shoes and the distant hum of ventilation. Then the elevator doors opened and CEO Malene Hart stepped out, her heels clicking against the floor. Darius glanced up instinctively and his heart stopped. On her wrist, catching the overhead light, was a silver bracelet with an intricate Celtic knot pattern intertwined with tiny sapphires. He knew that bracelet. He had designed it himself for his wife 2 months before she died. There were only two in existence. His dark brown hands began to tremble as he heard himself ask the question that would change everything. "Where did you get that bracelet?" Malene stopped mid-stride, her eyebrows arching with practiced condescension. She was 42 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Darius made in a month. She looked at him the way one might regard a fly on expensive furniture. Her voice was cool and measured, designed to remind him of his place in the corporate hierarchy. "Excuse me?" Darius knew he should apologize and return to emptying trash cans. He was 35 years old, a widower with a 7-year-old daughter at home, and he could not afford to lose this job. He was a black man in a high-stakes, low-wage role, and the margin for error was non-existent. But his feet remained rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on that bracelet. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "The bracelet on your wrist. I need to know where you got it." Malene's expression shifted from annoyance to something harder, more defensive. She began walking past him, but Darius stepped into her path, a move so unlike him that it surprised them both. Her tone sharpened considerably. "I fail to see how my jewelry is any concern of a maintenance worker." He pointed at the intertwined Celtic knots, the tiny sapphires representing each month of his marriage. "That design was custom made by a jeweler in Portland, Hicks and Sons. They only made two, both for me. One for my wife and one for our daughter when she turns 18. His voice cracked on the last word, and he saw something flicker in Malene's eyes. Fear or recognition, he could not tell which. Her hand moved unconsciously to cover the bracelet, and her voice lost its sharp edge. "You're imagining things. This is a common enough design. Celtic patterns are hardly unique." 7 sapphires arranged in a crescent around the central knot. The clasp is hidden inside the third link from the left. There's an inscription on the inside that says, "Forever begins now." That's what I told my wife on our wedding day. Malene's face had gone pale. Without a word, she unclasped the bracelet and turned it over, her fingers finding the hidden inscription. Her lips moved as she read the words, and the color drained from her cheeks until she looked almost ghostly under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her whisper was barely audible. "How do you know what this says?" Tears streamed down Darius's face. "Because I wrote those words. Because I held my wife's hand when she read them for the first time. Because I buried her 2 years ago after a drunk driver ran her off the road, and the bracelet was never found. The police said it must have been thrown from the car during the accident, lost somewhere in the ravine." His voice broke completely. "So I need you to tell me, Miss Hart, how you came to be wearing my dead wife's bracelet." Malene stared at him for a long moment, her composure crumbling like a facade held together by nothing more than willpower. Then she did something that surprised them both. She reached out and took his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Come with me. We need to talk somewhere private." They rode the elevator to the 42nd floor in silence, the tension between them thick enough to taste. Malene's corner office was enormous, all glass and chrome and carefully curated artwork, but Darius barely noticed any of it. He stood by the window looking out at the Boston skyline while she poured herself a drink with hands that trembled slightly. When she spoke, her back was still turned to him. 18 months ago, I received a package at my home. No return address, no note, just a small velvet box with this bracelet inside. I assumed it was from an admirer, someone who wanted to remain anonymous. I wore it because it was beautiful, and because I thought perhaps someday the sender would reveal themselves. Darius's voice was incredulous. You never tried to find out who sent it? Her laugh was bitter, self-mocking. Mr. Mitchell, when you reach a certain level of success, people send you things. Gifts, bribes, tokens of appreciation, or manipulation. I stopped asking questions about anonymous packages years ago. She turned to face him and met his eyes directly. But I can see now that this is different. This bracelet belonged to someone you loved, and somehow it found its way to me. I don't understand how or why, but I can see the truth of your grief written across your face. Darius studied her expression, searching for any sign of deception and finding only confusion that mirrored his own. My wife's name was Amara Mitchell. She was 31 when she died. She was a graphic designer, or at least that's what she told me. She worked from home, freelance projects mostly. She was a wonderful mother to our daughter, Lily. His voice softened with remembered love. She was a beautiful black woman, everything to me. Malene's hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment Darius thought she might be sick. She repeated the name in barely a whisper. Amara Mitchell, A.M. She sat down her drink so abruptly that whiskey sloshed over the rim onto the polished desk. "Wait here. Don't move." She crossed to a large safe built into the wall behind her desk, her fingers moving quickly over the combination lock. Darius watched as she pulled open the heavy door and retrieved a sealed envelope yellowed with age. She held it up, and Darius saw 2 letters written on the front in handwriting that made his knees buckle instantly. A.M., his wife's handwriting. He would have recognized it anywhere. In any context, under any circumstances, Malene's voice was shaking. Now, this came with the bracelet. I never opened it because I didn't know what AM stood for. I thought it was some kind of code, maybe initials for a project or a client. She held it out to him with trembling hands. "I think this was meant for you all along." Darius took the envelope as if it might crumble to dust in his fingers. The seal was intact, the paper slightly brittle with age, and he could smell something faint beneath the mustiness. Something that might have been Amara's perfume, or might have been his imagination, desperately filling in the gaps of his grief. He looked at Malene, seeking permission, or perhaps just a witness, and she nodded slowly. The seal broke with a soft tearing sound, and Darius pulled out a single sheet of paper covered in his wife's neat handwriting. His hands shook so badly that the words blurred, and he had to blink several times before they came into focus. The letter began with words that stopped his heart. "My dearest Darius, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and I need you to know the truth. I need you to understand that the life we built together was real, even if parts of my life before you were not what they seemed." Darius's legs gave out beneath him, and he sank into one of the leather chairs facing Malene's desk. She moved toward him instinctively, her hand outstretched, but stopped short of touching him, hovering in that uncertain space between stranger and something else entirely. The letter continued, each word a revelation that shattered everything he thought he knew about his marriage. "I never told you about my work with Hartford Financial. 3 years ago, before Lily was born, I was approached by a man named Richard Hart. He offered me a job off the books, investigating financial irregularities within his company. He suspected his CFO was embezzling funds and needed someone with my skills to trace the money without alerting anyone. I should have said no. I should have told you everything, but the money was good, and I thought I could help expose something wrong in the world." Darius looked up at Malene, his voice hollow with shock. "Richard Hart? Your father?" Malene nodded, her face ashen and drawn with the weight of inherited secrets. "He died 6 months ago. Heart attack. I inherited everything. The company, the responsibilities, the secrets. Apparently more secrets than I ever imagined." He returned to the letter, his eyes devouring every word. "I found what Richard was looking for and much more. The CFO, a man named Lucas Grant, wasn't just embezzling company funds. He was laundering money for people who don't forgive mistakes, people who don't leave witnesses. When he discovered I was investigating him, he made threats against me, against our family. Richard promised to protect me, promised to handle everything quietly, but I'm not sure he can. If you're reading this, Darius, it means he couldn't keep that promise." The letter ended with an address, Hartford Financial's headquarters, and a final plea that broke him completely. Find Malene Hart. She's Richard's daughter, and if something happens to me, she needs to know what her father was involved in. Tell her the truth was in the bracelet all along. I love you with everything I am. I love Lily more than life itself. I'm sorry I couldn't be honest while I was alive. Forgive me." Darius looked up at Malene, his vision completely blurred with tears. "She worked for your father. She was investigating corruption in your company, and now she's dead, and I'm only just learning any of this." Malene sank into the chair beside him, all pretense of corporate authority stripped away entirely. "I didn't know. I swear to you on everything I hold sacred. I didn't know any of this." She reached for his hand, then pulled back, uncertain of whether such contact was appropriate. Her voice dropped to barely audible. "Are you sure? Absolutely sure. Your wife didn't survive." The question hung in the air between them, absurd and terrible and somehow filled with the smallest grain of impossible hope. Darius shook his head slowly, the movement costing him everything. "I identified her body myself. I buried her in the ground. I watched them lower her coffin, while my 7-year-old daughter cried in my arms, asking why Mommy wouldn't wake up." Malene closed her eyes tightly, and when she opened them again, they were wet with tears of her own. "Then we need to find out how her bracelet ended up in my mailbox, and we need to find out what really happened the night she died, because I'm starting to believe nothing about that night was what it seemed." The clock on the wall showed past midnight, but neither of them had suggested leaving. The revelation of Amara's secret work had cracked something open between them, some wall of professional distance that now seemed absurd in the face of shared tragedy and mounting horror. Malene paced behind her desk, her mind visibly working through the implications. "My father kept meticulous records of everything. Every transaction, every meeting, every decision that happened in this company went through him first. If he hired your wife for an investigation, there will be documentation somewhere in his files." She stopped pacing and turned to face Darius, her expression torn between guilt and fierce determination. "I need to tell you something else, and I need you to understand that I only learned this after he died when I was going through his personal effects." Darius waited in silence, the tension stretching between them like a wire pulled too tight. Malene's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The bracelet wasn't sent to me anonymously. Not really. It was left in my father's personal effects, with specific instructions to forward it to my home address after his death." She took a shaky breath and retrieved a small slip of paper from her desk drawer. "But there was a note attached to it, one I didn't understand until this very moment." She read the words aloud, her voice trembling. "Found at the scene, keep safe until needed." The implication hit Darius like a physical blow to the chest. "You're saying someone was there that night? Someone saw what happened to Amara and took the bracelet instead of helping her?" His voice rose with each word, grief transmuting rapidly into burning rage. "Someone let my wife die and took her jewelry as some kind of souvenir or evidence." Malene shook her head helplessly. "I don't know what happened that night. I truly don't, but I'm starting to think the drunk driver story was a cover-up from the beginning, something my father engineered to protect himself or the company or both." Darius stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "She was investigating your CFO. She found evidence of money laundering for dangerous criminals, and then she conveniently died in an accident that nobody bothered to investigate too closely." He laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet office. "How stupid do they think people are?" Malene's response was quiet but cutting. "Smart enough to cover their tracks for 2 years without anyone asking questions. Smart enough that I never questioned it. Never looked too deeply into why my father seemed so troubled in his final months." She moved around the desk to stand before Darius. "I can't change what happened to your wife. I can't bring Amara back, but I can help you find out the truth and make sure whoever is responsible faces justice, real justice." "Why should I trust you? Your father was involved in this up to his neck." "My father is dead. Protecting him serves no one, least of all me." She took his hand firmly, her grip steady and strong. "If he was complicit in your wife's death, then I've been living a lie for my entire career, building my success on a foundation of blood. I need to know the truth as much as you do." Darius looked at the bracelet lying on the desk between them like a silent accusation. "Where do we start?" "With Lucas Grant, our former CFO. He resigned 6 months before your wife's death and disappeared completely from public view. My father said he retired abroad, but I never heard from him again." She moved to her computer with renewed purpose. "If anyone knows what happened, it's Lucas." The search took 3 hours. Malene called in favors from private investigators and forensic accountants, people who owed her answers and were surprised to be asked to deliver them in the middle of the night. Darius sat beside her throughout the process, learning more about the dark underbelly of corporate America than he had ever wanted to know. By 4 in the morning, they had a solid lead. Lucas Grant was living under an assumed name in a small Vermont town 40 miles from where Amara died. "We should call the police," Malene said, exhaustion heavy in her voice. "Let them handle this properly." Darius shook his head firmly. The police had 2 years to find the truth. They accepted the drunk driver's story without asking a single hard question. "I want to see his face when he tells me what happened. I need to hear it from his own mouth." Malene hesitated, weighing the risks against the rewards, then nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. But you should go home first. See your daughter. She needs you. I'll be back at 8. Don't leave without me." The morning sun streamed through Patricia Chen's kitchen windows when Darius returned. Amara's mother was nursing tea at the table, and her eyes widened at his disheveled appearance and haunted expression. "You look terrible. What happened?" Darius sank heavily into the chair across from her. "I need to ask you something about Amara, about her work." Patricia's expression became guarded in a way that immediately caught Darius's attention. "What about her work? She was a graphic designer. You know that." "Did she ever mention Hartford Financial or a man named Richard Hart?" The teacup rattled in Patricia's hands, and for a long moment she did not speak. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet with tears. "She told me you would ask someday. She made me promise not to say anything unless you asked directly, using those exact names." Darius felt the floor shift beneath him. "Chew, you knew?" "You knew she was doing something else, not the details. She never told me specifics about what she was doing or who she was working for, but I knew there was something secret in her life, some hidden part she was keeping from both of us. She said it was to protect you and Lily, that the less either of you knew, the safer you'd be." The tears spilled over now, tracking down her weathered cheeks in familiar paths. "When she died, I thought it was somehow my fault. I thought if I had pushed her harder to tell you the truth, if I had made her stop whatever dangerous thing she was doing, she might still be alive." Darius reached across the table and took her trembling hand. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." He told her about the bracelet, about the letter, about everything he had learned in Malene Hart's office. By the end, Patricia was sobbing openly. Her grief mingled with something that looked almost like relief at finally being able to share the burden. "Daddy!" Lily stood in the doorway in her pajamas, her natural hair a crown of tight coils tousled from sleep, her eyes moving between her father and grandmother with growing concern. "Why is Grandma crying? Did something bad happen?" Darius's heart clenched painfully. "Come here, sweetheart." He opened his arms. Lily climbed into his lap, her small body warm and familiar against his chest. Her dark brown skin was smooth against his uniform shirt. "Is something wrong, Daddy?" "I need to go somewhere today, somewhere very important. Grandma is going to stay with you until I get back." Lily's brow furrowed with the seriousness of a much older child. "Where are you going? Is it about Mommy?" The question hit him like a blow. "Why do you ask that, baby?" You only get that look on your face when you're thinking about her, the sad but trying not to be sad look. I can always tell. Darius hugged her tighter, marveling at how perceptive children could be. "I'm going to find out some things about Mommy, things I should have known a long time ago." Lily considered this with grave seriousness. "Will it make you less sad?" "I don't know, baby, but I think it might help us understand some things better." Lily nodded solemnly. "Okay, Daddy, but come back soon." "I will, sweetheart. I'll always come back to you. That's a promise." Malene was waiting in a black SUV outside Patricia's house at exactly 8 o'clock. She had changed into jeans and a dark sweater, and without the armor of her professional wardrobe, she looked younger, more vulnerable. They drove to Vermont in 3 hours, talking intermittently, sharing fragments of their lives that had nothing to do with death or conspiracies. Lucas Grant's house was a modest colonial on a quiet street, white paint peeling, garden overgrown with weeds. It looked like the home of someone who had stopped caring about appearances, who was waiting for something to end the limbo of his existence. "Are you sure about this?" Malene asked, her hand on his arm. "No, but I'm going anyway." The door opened to reveal a man in his 60s, gray-haired and hollow-eyed, who looked like he had aged decades in just a few years. "I wondered when someone would come." He looked at Malene. "You look just like your father, and you look like a man with a guilty conscience." The interior was neglected and dim, covered in dust. Lucas led them to a small living room and remained standing against the wall like a man facing a firing squad. "I know why you're here. The Amara Mitchell case. I've been waiting 2 years for this conversation." He looked at Darius. "You're her husband. I recognize you from the photos in her wallet." Darius felt his hands clench into fists. "You went through her wallet." "I went through everything. That night after the accident, I was there, not by coincidence, by design. I followed her from her meeting with Richard. I was supposed to scare her, that's all. Make her understand the investigation needed to stop." He laughed bitterly. "Instead, I watched another car run her off the road, a black sedan that came from nowhere. I didn't have time to react before her car went over the guardrail." "Who was driving?" Malene demanded. "I never saw the driver, but I traced the plates later. The car was registered to a shell company owned by Hartford Financial." He looked at Malene with something like sympathy. "Your father didn't order it, but whoever did used company resources." He retrieved a worn folder from a desk. "I've been keeping records. Everyone involved, everyone who knew. Your father tried to investigate. After he figured out someone had gone rogue, but his health failed before he found proof." He handed the folder to Malene. Inside were photos, documents, bank records. At the bottom, a photograph made her gasp. Malcolm Rhodes, our head of security. He handled logistics. But someone higher gave the order. Someone still in the company. Lucas crouched before Darius. "There's one more thing, something I haven't told anyone." His voice dropped. "Your wife didn't die in the initial crash. The car came to rest halfway down the ravine, caught on a tree. She was alive, conscious, trying to climb out." His voice cracked. "The sedan came back. Someone pushed the car the rest of the way down. Your wife died because someone made certain she would." The sound that escaped Darius was not quite human. Malene wrapped her arms around him as he shook with violent sobs. "She was trying to protect someone," Lucas continued through his own tears. "When I reached the guardrail before the sedan came back, she was talking, saying a name over and over. I think she was saying Lily. Her last thoughts were about getting back to her daughter." They remained in that dim room as afternoon faded to dusk, bound by the terrible truth. When Darius found his voice again, it was steady with resolve. "We're exposing every single one of them. I don't care if it brings down the entire company." Malene nodded. "We need to be smart. Malcolm Rhodes is dangerous. We gather more evidence, then take it to federal prosecutors." She looked at Lucas. "Will you testify?" "I've been hiding for 2 years. I'm tired of running. I'll tell them everything." They drove back to Boston in darkness. Malene took Darius to her penthouse. "You shouldn't be alone tonight, and we have work to do." They spent the night going through Lucas's files, building a timeline that stretched back years. By dawn, they had identified 3 more people involved, including a board member. Darius finally called Patricia. When he hung up, Malene was watching him. "Lily has been asking about you all morning." "I need to see her, then go. We'll meet this evening." Darius hesitated at the door. "Why are you doing this? You could protect your father's memory." "Because Amara died trying to do the right thing. My father spent his last months trying to make amends. If I let this stay buried, their sacrifices mean nothing." She met his eyes. "I never asked to inherit an empire built on blood." Lily was waiting at Patricia's door. She launched herself into Darius's arms. Daddy, I was so scared. You were gone all night. I'm sorry, baby. They sat together. Did you find out things about Mommy? I found out Mommy was very brave. She was trying to help people to stop bad things, and she loved us so much. She wanted to protect us. Is that why she went to heaven? Yes, sweetheart. I want to be brave like Mommy. You already are, Lily. The doorbell rang. Malene appeared. Expression grave. Malcolm Rhodes is dead. Found this morning. Someone is cleaning house. We need to move faster. Lily walked toward Malene. Are you helping my daddy? Malene crouched to her level. We're working together to find out what happened to your mommy. Lily took her hand. Thank you for helping my mom. Malene's composure cracked. Tears spilled as she looked at this child, offering gratitude. You're welcome. I wish I could have helped sooner. Patricia took Lily to a friend's house. Darius and Malene reassessed. Malcolm's death meant someone knew they were investigating. We need to go public, Darius said. Before anyone else is silenced, Malene nodded. A press conference tomorrow. I'll release everything that will destroy Hartford Financial. The company is already destroyed. The rot goes too deep. She walked to the window. My father created a machine that consumed lives. I want to end that legacy. The press conference was scheduled for 10 the next morning. By dawn, they had assembled journalists, law enforcement, and corporate watchdogs. Darius brought Lily despite Patricia's objections. He wanted her to understand her mother's death had mattered. Malene took the podium. 2 years ago, Amara Mitchell was murdered. She discovered crimes at this company's heart. Crimes certain individuals protected at any cost. Today, I accept responsibility for the cover-up. She named names, connected dots. She spoke of her father's involvement and later attempts at redemption of Malcolm Rhodes. Amara Mitchell was a hero. She risked everything. Her eyes found Darius. Her family deserves to know her sacrifice was not in vain. She announced a victims fund, new ethics policies, independent oversight. Then she resigned. This company needs new leadership without my name, without my father's mistakes. Her voice softened. I'm sorry to everyone hurt by our failures. I am deeply sorry. Malene walked to Darius and Lily. She knelt before them. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I hope it's a start. It's more than a start. It's what Amara would have wanted. Lily tugged her sleeve. Will the bad people go away? Malene smiled through tears. Yes, sweetheart. Your mommy's story will help prevent this from happening again. She withdrew the bracelet, pressing it into Darius's palm. This never belonged to me. It was always meant for you. Darius closed his fingers around the cool metal, feeling the familiar weight of the sapphires. The weeks that followed brought investigations and arrests. 3 executives were charged with accessory to murder. The board dissolved. Hartford Financial began rebuilding. Darius and Malene remained connected. She came to dinner at Patricia's house, learned Amara's favorite dishes, helped Lily with homework. It was not romance exactly, but something real growing from tragedy. One evening, 3 months later, Darius stood before the memorial shelf where Amara's photo sat beside the wooden box. Lily appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. Thinking about Mommy. Always. But today I'm thinking about something she used to say. She believed truth has a way of finding us. Did the truth find you, Daddy? Darius looked at the bracelet, at Amara's photo, at the daughter who carried her spirit. It did, baby. It took time, but it found us. He placed the bracelet in the box and closed the lid. Lily hugged him. I miss her. I know. I miss her too. But she's still with us in everything we do, in every choice we make to be brave and kind and honest. He stroked her curly hair. Your mom wanted the truth to find us, and it finally did. They stood together in the fading light, father and daughter, grieving and healing and learning to hope again. The weight of Lucas's revelation hung in the air like something physical, something that changed the very nature of the room they stood in. Darius felt as though he had been hollowed out from the inside. Everything he thought he knew about his wife's death reconstructed into something far more sinister, far more deliberate than a random accident caused by a drunk driver. Amara had not simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had been hunted, targeted, and ultimately murdered by people who viewed her life as nothing more than a loose end that needed to be tied off. Malene watched him with eyes that reflected her own dawning horror at the legacy her family had left behind. Her father, Richard Hart, the man she had admired and tried to emulate her entire career, had been complicit in covering up the murder of an innocent woman. Perhaps he hadn't ordered the killing himself, but he had certainly worked to ensure that the truth remained buried, that justice was never served, and now his daughter was left to reckon with the consequences of his choices, to decide whether she would continue the cover-up or tear down everything he had built in the name of truth. The drive back to Boston was largely silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts about what they had learned and what it would mean for their futures. For Darius, the path forward seemed clear. Expose the truth no matter the cost, and ensure that everyone responsible for Amara's death faced justice. But he also knew that this path would be dangerous. Malcolm Rhodes and whoever had given him his orders would not simply allow themselves to be exposed without fighting back. Lucas Grant's folder of evidence was dynamite, but dynamite could explode in your hands if you weren't careful how you handled it. For Malene, the decision was more complex. Exposing the truth meant destroying her father's legacy, dismantling the company he had spent his life building, and potentially ruining thousands of innocent employees who had no part in the crimes committed by their leadership. She had inherited Hartford Financial, believing it to be a source of pride, a testament to her family's success and contribution to the business community. Now she knew it was something else entirely, a monument to corruption, built on a foundation of lies and watered with innocent blood. Yet, even as she grappled with these competing considerations, Malene found herself drawn to the memory of Amara Mitchell, a woman she had never met, but whose courage and determination had set in motion events that would ultimately transform everything. Amara had risked her life to expose the truth about Hartford Financial, and she had paid the ultimate price for her principles. Could Malene do any less? Could she look at herself in the mirror each morning, knowing that she had chosen to protect her father's reputation rather than honor the sacrifice of the woman whose bracelet she had unknowingly worn for 18 months? By the time they reached Boston, Malene had made her decision. She would help Darius expose the truth, whatever the consequences. She would tear down her father's legacy and build something new in its place, something that Amara Mitchell would have been proud of. It was the least she could do for the woman whose death had been covered up by her family, and for the daughter who deserved to know that her mother had been a hero, not just another victim of random tragedy. The investigation intensified over the following days. Malene used her position and resources to dig deeper into the company's records, uncovering layer after layer of corruption that went back decades. Lucas Grant's evidence was just the tip of the iceberg. There were other victims, other cover-ups, other lives destroyed in the name of corporate profit and personal advancement. The more they learned, the more determined they became to expose everything to ensure that Hartford Financial's house of cards came tumbling down in a way that could never be rebuilt. Meanwhile, Darius found himself grappling with a different kind of challenge. How to explain to his 7-year-old daughter that her mother's death had not been an accident, that the official story they had believed for 2 years was a carefully constructed lie designed to protect murderers. He knew Lily deserved the truth, but he also knew that some truths were too heavy for young shoulders to bear. She had already lost her mother. Did she also need to lose her innocence, her belief in a world where bad things happened randomly rather than by design? In the end, he chose a middle path. He told Lily that her mother had been very brave, that she had died trying to help people and expose wrongdoing. He told her that the bad people who had hurt her mommy were going to face justice, and that Malene was helping to make that happen. He didn't tell her about the sedan that had returned to push the car over the edge, about the cold-blooded calculation that had transformed a corporate cover-up into murder. Some details could wait until she was older, until she could process them without having her entire worldview shattered. Lily accepted his explanation with the solemn gravity that children sometimes display when confronted with adult realities. She didn't fully understand what had happened or why, but she understood the essential truth. Her mother had been brave, and now her father and his new friend were working to honor her memory by making sure the people who hurt her would be punished. That was enough for now. The rest could come later when she was ready. The federal prosecutors moved quickly once they had the evidence. Malcolm Rodes's death, initially ruled a suicide, was reclassified as a homicide when forensic evidence revealed inconsistencies with the official narrative. 3 more executives were implicated in the cover-up, their communications and financial transactions painting a clear picture of a coordinated effort to silence witnesses and destroy evidence. Arrest warrants were issued, lawyers were retained, and the media descended on Hartford Financial like vultures circling a dying animal. Throughout it all, Malene remained the calm at the center of the storm. She cooperated fully with investigators, opened every file and record to their scrutiny, and testified under oath about everything she had learned regarding her father's involvement in the cover-up. She resigned from her position as CEO, not in disgrace, but in dignity, acknowledging the company's failures while also pointing the way toward redemption. The Victims Fund she established became a model for corporate accountability, providing support not just for Amara Mitchell's family, but for all those who had been harmed by Hartford Financial's decades of misconduct. For Darius, the resolution brought something he had not expected, a sense of peace, not forgetting, not moving on, but acceptance. Amara was gone, and nothing could bring her back. But her death had meant something. Her sacrifice had led to the exposure of widespread corruption, the prosecution of powerful criminals, and reforms that would prevent others from suffering similar fates. She had died a hero, even if the world had not known it at the time. And now everyone knew the truth. That knowledge was a gift both to him and to their daughter. As for the relationship between Darius and Malene, it evolved in ways neither of them had anticipated. What began as an alliance born of shared tragedy gradually transformed into something deeper, a connection forged in the fire of their shared quest for justice. They did not rush into romance. Both of them carried too much grief and too many complicated feelings for that, but they found in each other a kind of understanding that was rare and precious, a mutual recognition of what they had lost and what they had found in the process of losing it. Malene became a regular presence in Lily's life, not as a replacement for the mother she had lost, but as a new kind of family member, someone who understood the weight of the past and was committed to building a better future. She learned to cook the dishes that Amara had loved, helped with homework and school projects, and sat through countless viewings of Lily's favorite movies. In return, Lily offered her something equally valuable, the gift of hope, the reminder that life goes on even after tragedy, and that love can bloom in the most unexpected places. The memorial shelf in Darius's bedroom became a sacred space, a place where past and present could coexist without conflict. Amara's photo still smiled down from her position of honor, flanked by candles and the few keepsakes that had survived the accident. And in the wooden box beside her photo, wrapped in soft cloth, the silver bracelet rested in its final home. The sapphires still caught the light when Darius opened the box, still spelled out their message of eternal love in the language of precious stones. But now they also told another story, the story of truth revealed, of justice served, of a mother's love that had reached across the barrier of death to protect her family one final time. On quiet evenings when Lily was asleep and the house was still, Darius would sometimes take out the bracelet and hold it in his deep brown hands, feeling the cool weight of the metal and remembering all that it represented. He would think about Amara, about the secret life she had led and the sacrifice she had made, about the bravery that had defined her final months and the love that had motivated everything she did. And he would think about the journey that had brought him to this place of painful but profound peace. The unlikely alliance with a corporate CEO, the confrontation with a guilty man in a Vermont farmhouse, the press conference that had changed everything. Most of all, he would think about Lily, about the daughter they had created together, and the future that stretched out before her like an unwritten book. She carried her mother's eyes and her mother's courage, and she would grow up knowing the truth about who Amara Mitchell had been and what she had stood for. That knowledge was the greatest gift Darius could give her, greater even than the bracelet itself. It was the gift of meaning, of purpose, of understanding that her mother's life and death had mattered, had changed things, had made the world a little bit better than it was before.